Hey there, everyone. My name is Ryan Schul. Welcome to my data channel. So in the in the case study today, I want to take a look at an event that was very catastrophic called the Palisades wildfire. It started back in January 1st, 2025, near Pedra Morada Drive. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. In the Pacific Palisades neighborhood. So um, basically, is a horrible fire. It wiped out many thousands of acres of homes and pristine wildlife, and just a very, very unfortunate event. And police just recently discovered who committed this atrocity. I read this article, this just came up on my radar like a couple of days ago. Florida man arrested on federal crime complaint alleging he maliciously started what became the Palisade fire. So if you read into the article a little bit, they're talking about well, what was it? Cell phones, yellow, cell phone. Okay, so this is what really caught my interest. So law enforcement determined using witness statements, video surveillance, cell phone data, and analysis of fire dynamics and patterns at the scene, among other things, that this guy, Render Schnatt, maliciously set the fire just after midnight on January 1st on land owned by the Mountain Recreation and Conservation Authority. Okay, so what that might not mean a whole lot to some people, but what I thought was really fascinating is that somehow law enforcement officials, maybe the FBI, I'm not sure, actually acquired cell phone data probably from from a bunch of different people. Maybe they just pinpointed it to this one guy and they kind of like triangulated everything together. I'm not sure what the whole process was, but there's two things that really stuck out at me. So the cell phone data I thought was very fascinating because any cell phone company, the big three, I believe, is Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint, and there's smaller cell phone providers. But I started to think if you could procure data. Now, when I'm talking about this is very highly confidential, sensitive data. You and I just can't go out and look at people's cell phone data, right? But if you're a high-up law enforcement official or a member of the FBI, I would think that you could probably do this pretty easily. So I started to think, like, now today is 10, what is it? My eyes are getting worse and worse by the minute here. 10/12/2025. Okay, and the incident occurred on January 1st, 2025. So it took them almost 9 months. And this article came out, when was this? October 8th. So just over 9 months to track this guy down. But I was thinking, like, can't they do that much faster? And, I have nothing to do with law enforcement. I certainly don't work for the FBI. So I don't know the processes and procedures behind that. But I thought, if you know the longitude, latitude coordinates of the epicenter of where this fire started, and you know people who were in that vicinity, that general area, and the people that were at that spot at that point in time, can you pick out the 10 most likely suspects that might have triggered this fire or might have initiated this fire, right? So I looked this up online. Apparently the latitude is here and the longitude is this, right? So we have 34 north and 118 degrees west. Now, like I said, we can't just obtain people's cell phone data. That's obviously a violation of people's privacy, right? But we can simulate using a realistic data set and 10,000 synthetic cell phones, right? I'm going to create data for cell phones and then look at the GPS coordinates of how these cell phones move over time. How are they moving up and down, left and right, north, south, east, and west, right? So I want to go ahead and dive into this case study and see what we can find. Because again, like, I don't know what law enforcement officials were doing. I can only speculate. I don't know why it took 9 months, but I came across this article, I think like 2 days ago. I wrote the code in about a half of a day. I would think that there was just an easier way to go ahead and, like, somehow track down this perpetrator, and it wouldn't take 9 months to do that. But again, I don't know all the stuff that goes into that, okay? But this is what I came up with. So NumPy and Pandas, I'm going to set a seed. Number of devices is going to be 10,000 simulated cell phones. Now, again, I, myself, and you, I can guarantee you and me don't have access to people's cell phones. The cell phone carriers, Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, will have access to this, right? Like if you're the FBI, you would probably have to make a request or maybe even have a warrant or something. But I'm sure it can be done, and I'm sure it can be done fairly quickly, given the severity of the incident here, right? Again, it was catastrophic. Many people lost their homes. I don't know how many hundreds, several hundreds, maybe 1,000 people, and thousands of acres were burned. So this is a pretty serious thing here. And I think, we can analyze this a little bit and try to find out how to streamline the process of figuring out where the top most likely suspects are given the lat long coordinates of the event and how all these people are tracked using their cell phone devices over a period of time. So I set the start time as 12:31, and this is 12:31, basically the beginning of the day, and we're going to go to the end of the day, 2025-01, and this is midnight. So we have like 2 days of data here. Okay, so 48 hours of data, and I want frequencies to be 15 minutes. We can look at 1-minute intervals. I don't know if that's going to help us make a more accurate prediction as to which device is associated with the person that caused the fire. I think 15 minutes is sufficient here. We can run the analysis pretty quick and pretty efficient. And again, I think this is sufficient to get to the granular detail that we need to get here. But of course, you can change this. You can make this to 5 minutes, right? You can set this to 5 minutes. If you need 1 minute, you can set this to 1 minute. You'll have a lot more records generated, and it'll take a little bit longer to do the analysis. So that's the trade-off there, right? You can probably get a little bit more precision in terms of how the analysis is worked out, but is that going, and it's definitely going to cost you more in terms of compute time, right? And time just to wait to see what the final results look like. I think 15 minutes is totally fine in this case. So just to isolate things even more, I'm saying up like a 48-hour window and saying that the event occurred within this time period, but we can actually start an event start date, and we can set an event end date and see if that can help us even make a more precise determination about what happened here. So I'm going to use Haversine distance to look at the overall distance from the incident to all the cell phone users and tracking their devices, and then try to see what the distance is. I'm going to try to minimize this distance, right? And then by doing that, pick the top 10 people that are most likely associated with this incident, right? And we know now it was just one. It could have been two. I think if you go for 10, I think that makes sense. Again, you can set that number to whatever you want. You can say, I want to look at the top 100 cell phones that were closest in proximity, but then you would have to track down 100 people, do 100 investigations, go to 100 persons or people's houses, right? And again, this is just an assumption. These are all assumptions I'm making, guys. This is not absolute guaranteed concrete truth, but I think the assumption of 10 cell phones moving around all over the place, right, close to the proximity of the epicenter of this horrible event, I think this is fine. So that is the setup there. Haversine distance is going to show us the distances from the cell phones to the site, and we are going to go ahead and create simulated cell phone. Let me kick this off because this will take a couple minutes to run. Control Enter. So we're going to simulate cell phone users and the tracking. We're going to assume that they are moving around and tracking. And again, like I don't have access to this data, and and nobody does unless you're a cell phone company. The FBI would have to go ahead and make that request. But you could easily dump that into this model. You won't have to create your own simulation, right? You would just load the data that you have, actual cell phone data, with the actual lat long coordinates, and you get the output that you need, right? So that's the point here. So we're going to go ahead and look at the tracks or the movement of all these cell phone users, right? And it has to be greater than or equal to the start event and less than or equal to the end event. Okay, and I'm copying everything into data frame event. So if you look at my code, I do this a lot. So I create a data frame, do whatever I need to do, and then create a copy of that, and then move on to the next stage of the analysis. I think that's better to do. I think that's good practice, because if you make a change in the data frame, which is like the original source code, and it takes a while to run that analysis because these easily could take hours, maybe even days if the data set is massive. But if you take a copy and you make a change to the copy, and it's actually a mistake, it's a accidental change, then you only have to go back to this step right here, right? Like just saying, if it took a half a day or a day to run this, and this DF event has an issue down here on the next line, you only have to go back one line of code to reinitiate this data frame. You don't have to go back to the beginning and redo all of this from the top. So the point of taking a copy, right, I don't have to go through this again. I'd like to take a copy because if there's a mistake, I only have to go back one step. I don't have to go back to the beginning. So hopefully that makes sense, right? That is the expectation here. So we have the device ID, we have 10,000 IDs, we have the timestamp, right? Because we have to look at this in 15-minute intervals, and we know the event occurred pretty close to midnight on December 31st, 2024, right? Or yeah, and then, or maybe early 2025, like right at January 1st, the first few minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes into the new year. We don't know exactly what time, but we know pretty close. It was right at the end of 2024 or right at the beginning of 2025. And people think that was probably right at the end of 2024 in the last few minutes, like close to midnight. So we have the event here, and I'm going to go ahead and print the shape. So this is going to show us 4 columns. These are all the simulated cell phones, 10,000 times 2 days. So it's 24 hours times 60 minutes times 15, right? So we have to get this into 15-minute interval. So where was that? I'm just looking for the math here. Yeah, I think it's kind of like built in. We have the number of devices here, 10,000. Let me just see where that goes quick. Yeah, it's fine. 10,000, we have the 15-minute interval, right? That comes from over here. So 10,000 times 15 minutes times 2 days, right? So that's how we get this number here. Then we're just looking for a subset, right? So we get down to 10,000, and then we're going to look for the device ID and the minimum event. So this is the minimum distance from that cell phone, and essentially the user of the cell phone, right? And the original lat-long coordinates that we had defined when the event occurred. And we get the distance event right here. This comes from the haversine distance, UDF over here. So that is right here, haversine in kilometers. And you always use lat one, long one, lat 2, long 2, right? So you always have to have like a beginning end of lat and beginning and end of longitude, right? It's a pretty simple concept down here. The radius right here is 6371, and then we're looking at different degrees right here. So you can just Google it, and this would be a great learning opportunity. Haversine distance. So Google for that, okay? And these first couple ones are probably going to be ads over here. So here's sklearn. I use this a lot in my work. So haversine distances. This is pretty basic. This is a formula right here. What else? Haversine formula. Yeah, the whole point is that it shows you the distance on a curved surface, right? Because the surface of the Earth is curved. So you have to use some trigonometry over here, right? So you have sine, cosine, what else? Arc sine. I used to have all these memorized when I took calc, but that was years ago. So I would just go ahead and plug in the formula, and you can get that easily if you do calculate haversine distance Python, and you'll have at least a couple different ways to derive this, right? I mean, there's one true way to do that, but there's built-in libraries that will do this for you very easy. If you want a really cool exercise, you can actually build this from scratch and then compare that to the libraries that are built into Python, right? So here's a good example if you want that. So that would be pip install haversine and then run this right here, and it'll give you the distance. But again, if you wanted to find the whole thing from scratch and build it from the ground up, you can do that. So so that's where we are. So we get the device ID, these are the top 10 most suspicious potential um, culprits, perpetrators, right? And then the distance from the cell phone device to the actual lat long coordinates where the event was triggered, right? So let's map the event point and look at the top 10 closest samples. First, we need to make sure that the top 10 table includes the lat long coordinates by the minute where each device hit its event day minimum. Okay, so that is what we're going to do in the next step here. So we have the data frame event that comes from back over here, right? If you go back a couple steps, you'll see that data frame event. We're adding in the kilometers, the timestamp, the device ID timestamp, minimizing the distance, right, to find out who's closest to the what's it called, the origin of the disaster, and then we're going to group by the device ID and the kilometers, kilometer distance, that's the haversine distance, and look at the minimum distance, and we'll use that to create the top 10 points, and we can display the top 10 points. I also want to plot this on a Folium map, so I do a lot of work with Folium maps and Plotly maps. I like Plotly, I like Folium, they're both great tools. You can pick and choose which one you have a preference for. I like both. Sometimes I'll switch back and forth between them depending on what I'm trying to accomplish. And I think they're both great. They probably have their pros and they probably have their cons. Usually I'll try both and see what the outcome is and see which one makes more sense. You really have to pick the right tool for the job. You can pick Plotly and do it that way. You can pick Folium and do it that way. I went with Folium, right? And I'm adding in a couple of different parameters, the center of the latitude, center of the longitude, and I'm building up the map. So this is going to be a Folium map right here. So it's interesting with Folium and Plotly is different code and kind of different look and feel of the code. But in terms of how the charts are built, it's exactly the same. You take different layers, you start building in different events or different lat long coordinates or different items from your data frame if you want pop-ups when you mouse over the chart or the plot that you create. So it's all these different markers that you can set to, right? So we have here the location is going to be the latitude and the longitude. The pop-up is going to be the event. The tooltip is going to be event location, and the icon is going to be colored red, and we add this to M. So this is what I was referring to a couple of minutes ago. You build these different layers, you keep adding layer onto layer onto layer onto layer onto layer, and everything is called M, and everything gets appended onto M, and then right at the end, you display the results of M. So here I'm creating a circle with a radius of 100 meters right here to make sure we capture everything. The location, the color is going to be red, fill-in will be true, and all this gets added to M. So you can see how this goes incrementally, step by step, piece by piece, brick by brick, right? So we go in the next step to location. The radius is going to be 6 meters now, 6 meters. And this is all metric. I'm in the US. Everyone in the US uses the US standard system. I wish we could get off of that and use meters, but I know most of the people in the world are in the metric system, so they'll use meters, so I'll go with that. If you want to do the conversion, totally fine. I think if the audience is only US and you're only staying in US, it might make more sense to use the US standard system. I know YouTube is broadcast all over the world, and I will pretty much guarantee most of the people that see this video are not in the US. So I'm going to cater to that audience and just make everything metric. So we get down to the end again, add to M down here. The last step is for location. This is the row of the data frame. We're looking in the latitude and the longitude. Again, row, lat, long, target latitude, target longitude, and plot this, right? So that is the breakdown of this script. So over here we have the top 10 devices, the timing of the event. You can see that all of this is late in the day, 2024, right? That's when it's assumed that the incident occurred, right? So this is like 4 p.m., this is 11 p.m., this is 12:15 p.m., 12:45, and then we have the distances, right? So in the next step, I want to take all of that information, again, true that up, make sure everything's fine. We have the device ID, the minimum time, again, it's end of the day, 2024, the lat, long coordinates, and distance to the event. So here's my plotly chart. If I zoom out, you can see the whole United States, right? But I'm going to zoom in here, and you can see basically based on the lat-long coordinates where officials predicted that this event was initiated, this horrible catastrophe started, was right here. So this is the lat-long coordinates of the event location. These are the top 10 cell phone users. So we don't have people's names. That's totally to be expected. This is anonymous data. We can convert anonymous data to like a name recognition. So we have a person's name and address and contact information. We certainly have the cell phone because they're carrying their device on them when they committed this crime. So these two are within the area of, we defined it as 100 meters, right? So 100 comes from over here, radius of 100. And we're looking at all of these people and who's closest to this. So we have device, that person, that person, that person, that person, that person. So we have the top 10. We can go ahead and reach out to those top 10 people, start the investigation. But these top 2 right here are the most suspicious ones, right? They're close to the event at that time, at that date. So those 2 would be the primary initiation, like investigation. I don't know what it's called because I don't work for the FBI or any kind of law enforcement agency. But those 2 really jump out at me. And if we contact those 2 and get no traction whatsoever, we have 8 more because we have the entire top 10 list right here. And if none of these top 10 work out, we can broaden the parameters for the search even more. I can pretty much guarantee it's going to be one of these top 10, most likely these top 2, this person right here, right? Device 08657, it looks like, and this 07134. Doesn't work out. Look at the other 8 that doesn't work out. Broaden the parameters of the search, and I think you would have a shakedown at that point. So that was my take. Again, I don't know why it took 9 months to get the guy. I'm glad they did it. And like, I don't know what goes into all these investigations. Maybe you need warrants. Maybe you have to, there's some precedent or some what is the thing? Precedent or legal requirement or something. So I don't know what goes into it. What was I trying to think of? What's the word? Standardization. Cosmopolitan, I forgot. I don't know. Anyways, if maybe there's some precedence required, it takes 9 months. But if you want to do a quick and dirty analysis of cell phone data, who's closest to what lat-long coordinate at a specific time, a specific date, this is how you can do it. Okay, so I just thought about the exercise yesterday, put the code together, took about a half a day. There's some really nice results here that I think that we can, get in front of the higher ups and start making some informed, intelligent decisions based on this data. So that's it, guys. That's all I wanted to show. Those are my findings with this analysis, this case study about how to catch a perpetrator using cell phone signals and latitude plus longitude coordinates. Hopefully this was interesting and insightful for you. I learned a couple new things when I put this together. So I'm going to save this file in HTML format, and I'll share the code with you so you have all this source code over here. You can run the analysis for yourself, and I will post the code when I post the video a little bit later today. So thanks for your time, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.